Any things that you want to raise regarding last week? Some questions? Yeah.
Think about what Singer just said, like effective altruism.
Yeah.
I wonder what's the difference between that kind of altruism,
Yeah,
with charity, just normal charity. Like we are in charity work, we donate our personal time,
yeah,
to have some of our resources
yes,
to help the others,
yeah,
which I think in a great extent matches the the spirit of Singer's effective altruism. And
yeah.
I think if we consider effective altruism in the sense of charity, are we lowering the power of altruism, which is a very noble action of sacrificing perhaps our loving lives to save the others?
Good. Did you hear his question? So the question was, we saw a little bit about effective altruism, a very short video of a very large movement. But I guess the main question was, we do charity, we contribute to charity. There's other organizations in the world that have been doing charity for a very long time. And there comes this Peter Singer and this effective altruism offering sort of like a different model. And the question is, what is so different about this? How is this different from what other organizations are doing? What is it that forces us in effective altruism to revisit some of the assumptions from before? So I have my own thoughts on this. Do you have any thoughts about from what you've seen? What are some maybe the differences about what Peter Singer is talking about? Do you have any thoughts on this? Utilitarian, yeah.
Whereas like normal charity stuff, really look at like effectiveness of like charity model. Like
Okay.
the way the charity is based on its subjective values.
Okay.
That's what he really knows if it goes to
All right, good. So this is really interesting. So maybe charities generally look at something else, whereas effective altruism in the name suggests that it looks at effectiveness. Whatever effectiveness means, we still don't know. But this is a good point. So in your views, the both of you, what do other charities focus on? You said something like values, but how do other charities know that they're doing charity? What is it that they focus on? Let's say that you do charity or you give money to other charity. What do you focus on to know that you're doing good, if not effectiveness? Maybe whatever you tell me. I don't know. What do you think? Intention? Okay.
give it to
Yeah.
so that
So the intent of the person who is doing the charity. So if I feel good about me helping somebody else, then that's good enough for me. Something like that. Okay, good. Anything else that traditional charities do that's different than the effectiveness direction? What's your take on this since you raised the question? Your basic understanding of the what effective altruism is trying to do?
Yes, because like when we talk about effective altruism, it seems like a conflicting idea to me because when we talk about altruism,
Yes.
we are not considering any values or utilitarian force, but the word effective, which is kind of an economic term which we we allocate resources to different areas.
Right.
Like it seems like when we are talking about effective, we always put our own interest in front of other things. But the word altruism is kind of like the opposite, where we put the others in front of our own interest.
Yeah. So these are very interesting discussions. I'm very glad that you raised this. We're gonna touch a little bit on this here. I have my own answers, but I feel like it's very good for us to aim in this course to figure this out together. And I think we'll revisit this at the end of the course to see if we have better answers for this. But I think traditional charity is focusing on the person's intent or the person's values of the person who's doing the charity. rather than perhaps focusing on a group of people or the targets of the charity, and then having some sort of assessment which ties to our psychological science, looking at evidence, knowing that we're doing some good. So what is good? What is effectiveness? How to discuss and debate these kind of ideas. And I think the important things to raise here is that the traditional charities have an issue with effective altruism, in the sense that why do we need that? What kind of a paradigm is that? Why do we want to force utilitarianism or economics ideals to something like charity? Is this helping charity or is this hurting charity? I think at the beginning there was some hesitation regarding whether this is really contributing to good or actually decreasing the amount of good that we're doing in the world. And I want us to discuss and debate these kinds of things. So as a first step, I'm going to show you what it is that I want us to do together by going over the syllabus. So you can scan the code. I'm going to open this very briefly so we can go over this together, and we'll do the Moodle announcement. So we'll have a link and time to go over this in detail. But generally, so there's like a lot of stuff about course objectives and the learning outcomes. If you want to know a little bit about previous years, there's the links to all the teaching materials, which are available here. So you'll see that all the courses, all the teaching that I've ever done, including all the videos and all the tutorials, everything is on here, separated by years. And another thing is that you can go and you can have a look at the teaching evaluation, so you can see whether this is suitable for you or not. There's also like a teaching portfolio that I try and update every year to reflect what it is that I'm trying to do with the students and so forth. I also try and make it clear why you might want not to take this course or try something different. So there are a little bit of warnings and things for you to consider. But I'd say that we went beyond this. There's some advice for you that I think that you should read. So some students don't read the syllabus very much, but I think it's worth your 5 to 10 minutes as you contemplate how you can increase your effectiveness in this course, so that you know that this course is really good for you and it's going to help you, perhaps not just this course, but more broadly in your lives and your careers. Teaching philosophy, we talked a little bit about this last time. And then there's the structure and assessment component. It's almost complete. This is like 90%. I'm leaving 10% of kind of like thinking, what do I want to emphasize and how I want to update this? And there's two components. First one is individual, but most of the components are teamwork. The individual components are two, class engagement or participation. So I will come over to you and ask you questions. I do care about you being here. I do care about you participating, you contributing to increase everybody's effectiveness in this course. If it's just like you being passive and not interacting with me, I don't think we'll get a lot from this course. So engagement is important. Because there's a little bit of a gap in terms of knowledge, in terms of a little bit of experience, I want us to catch up with the experience and the knowledge. So there's going to be a little bit of homework, some tasks for you to do. And I'll show you what that means. So weekly readings or tasks, it's not going to be too much, I hope. And there's going to be a selection for you to choose from, either podcasts or TED Talks or a regular reading. So there's going to be something that you can choose from, whatever suits you, however you like to do your preparation. But it will require you to come with something to the class so that you don't just feel disconnected from everything. In terms of team tasks, there's going to be 4 different tasks. Perhaps at the later stage, we can revisit this if this feels like too overwhelming. But all of these kind of inform one another in order to give you a sense of understanding of how to do good in the world and how to do good better. And we're going to do all sorts of things that give well, and some of the biggest effective altruism organizations are doing scientifically in trying to establish what is good, what is better, what is effective. So we'll debate all these things by doing actual hands-on projects on this. And I'll show you some of the amazing things that GiveWell is offering you as part of this process. We're going to write chapters on effective altruism. So for example, what does it mean to do effective charitable giving in the area of animal welfare or poverty or climate change? So each team will have a different domain to try and apply these principles. And in this course, we're going to tie into taking psychological science that we'll be discussing in class and applying this in order to help the greater community to do things more effectively. So increasing charitable giving through psychological science, we'll run an experiment. The teams will be competing a little bit about how to do the most impactful increasing of charitable giving. So you will conduct kind of like a little bit of a manipulation, an experiment, and an intervention. Then I have a little bit of funding. I will actually run this data collection on a real sample to give you feedback on how well you've constructed the experiment. So we'll do real live experiments on charitable giving in this class so that we can inform the general community. And we'll contemplate what are some of the limitations that psychological science says prevent people from donating more or giving more or caring more. And I'll give you some examples at the beginning of the class after we finish with the syllabus. So there's lots of information about this. There's a bit of a, I'll fill in all the deadlines, but for now you can see like the topics, how we should be more fact-based. So this is going to be next week. So factfulness, human nature. Are we good or bad? How do we know whether we're good or bad? What do we think we know from social psychology? What does actual evidence show in social psychology? All sorts of biases about the world, how we think about the world. How can we think more rationally or better, more effective about the world? A little bit of experimental philosophy. So social psychology takes social psychological methods and applies those to philosophy. So we'll be contemplating things like, what is the true self? What is free will? What is agency? What does it mean to have moral responsibility? And there are some amazing experiments done in social psychology to help philosophy do better in establishing these concepts. Ethical behavior, what does it mean to be unethical? How is this different from morality? And then we'll have some lectures. I'm hoping to get some guest lectures to people that really come from the field to talk to you so that you can interact with them and learn a little bit. So I'm leaving this open for now. And then, yeah, some guest presentations. So if you go over this, there's the course summary that I saw some of you contribute to. So that's in there. We're going to do most of our interactions on Slack. So I will be asking you to install Slack and have this ready for you. We'll move all of the announcements, everything that we do, all the interaction. And the reason for Slack and not doing everything on Moodle is that Slack is a lot more immediate. Everything is going to be open. Everybody can see all the interaction between me, the TAs, and you. So whenever you have a question, please don't email us. Please don't do this privately unless there's a private issue. If there's something about the course, ask us on Slack. And then when we reply, everybody else can see this all the time. And the nice thing about Slack is that you can tag, you can add links, you can do all sorts of things. There's a thread, you can follow the thread, you can search, all sorts of things that in Moodle are difficult to do. But Slack has been, we've pre-tested this proof of concept. We've seen that this is a very good way of communicating. Team projects. So every time I will ask you, how do you know that you're effective? How do you know that you're effective in this course? How do you know that you're effective in your team? So ask yourself all kinds of questions. In order to ensure that you can be effective, we'll ask you to do team contracts for you to kind of design the plan of how you want to tackle things. So there is a score, there is a grade for the team contracts, but this is the best tool that we've had in order to tackle the issue of coordination in the teams and the teams, ensuring that the teams do well. So there's a contract template that you can go and have a look at. We do a pre-mortem, so you will be asked to anticipate all sorts of things that might go wrong and write about this. A pre-mortem here. And then at the end of the course, I'll ask you to reflect on, from the contract to what actually happened, do a team report on how effective everything was, what did you learn, what the implications were, and so forth. And at the midterm and the end term, I will ask you to evaluate your teamwork and evaluate one another, and also evaluate me and give us feedback so that in the second part of the semester, we can maybe aim to do a little bit better. So there's a bit here on class engagement and what that means, some plans about the tutorials. Weekly readings starts from week 4. So once the add drop period is over and we know who is here and we're starting to do things, I will ask you to prepare from week 4, week 5, and so forth. And you can see that you can do a podcast, a TED Talk, a reading, or an online game or a task. So it's going to be a combination of the two. So I'll ask you to diversify. So if you do this in 1 week, the following week, please do a different kind of task. So you'll get to taste a little bit of all of that, but it's not to overwhelm you. It's something to get you engaged. So the readings are mostly from books, very easy reading. It's not heavy. It's not like an academic article or anything like that. And it comes from mostly Peter Singer, William from Doing Good Better. So two of them are from Peter Singer. And there's a few ways for you to get access to this book. Some of these books have been bought by the effective altruism movement. So they have the rights, and you can download the podcast that reads the book as an audiobook, or you can get an ebook to download. You can ask, actually, you can go on each one of these websites and ask them to mail you for free a hard copy of one of these books, so you can keep this or share this with others if you want to. Plus, there's some copies in the library. If you can't access any of these chapters or any of these books, come to me and we'll figure this out. Lots of very interesting podcast episodes where you get to hear how these thinkers debate, think about, reflect issues of charity. All sorts of, I think, inspiring TED Talks. And then a lot of effective games. We touched a little bit, I think, last week on how rich am I? So put in a salary of whatever it is that you'll earn in graduation in 10 years and so forth, and see how rich you are compared to other people in the world. And things about your career. So you might think, how is this related to what I'm going to do after graduation? So 80,000 hours, the website, is offering you free advice to sit with you and contemplate with you what is perhaps the best course of action for you to take in your career. But before you do all this consultation, if you ever choose to, you can do their online quizzes that might help you think about how to be more effective, happy, fulfilling career after you graduate here. So they take into consideration your skills, what you're studying right now, and then thinking about what your goals are. So if you care about a specific domain and you come from a specific profession like psychology, and you have specific skills, then they will try to mingle this together to say, this is how we think about the different paths that you have. If you take this path, it's going to be this effectiveness. You take this path. So I think interesting exercises for you. So you can have a look at all these TED Talks, these readings, these tasks, and see which ones seem the most interesting for you. We'll write a book together. We did this 2 years ago. So students and I together wrote a book about open science. We'll do something very similar for effective altruism. So you can go over here and click on this. So the general outline is already here, but as you see, you'll be separated into groups that deal with things like career choice, how to maximize welfare in career choice, in animal welfare, climate change, existential threats, nuclear weapons or pandemics, long-term views. So we typically think and concentrate on what's happening right now, let's say poverty in developing countries. But there are billions of people who are around us and need to be considered, but they're not born yet. So maybe we should consider the long-term view of all the human beings or animals or whoever is going to come in the future. Does this make a change in the way that we contribute and do charity? Global poverty, health, emerging technologies. So there's lots of concerns about AI and the safety of AI and these kinds of risks. etc., etc. So you can have a look at this. We'll separate you into groups, teams in a couple of weeks. So there are lots of instructions regarding this, how to increase charitable donations using psychological science. So all sorts of guidelines about how you can construct an intervention. So I'm going to give you a very simple scenario where we ask our participants, here's $5 for you. How much of these $5 are you willing to donate to, let's say, GiveWell? And then we want to maximize the amount of money that instead of keeping for themselves, they're going to give to a charity. What kind of interventions psychological science offers to do this? So each team will concentrate on a different kind of domain, but the main purpose of this whole thing is to brainstorm how to get people to donate more money instead of keeping things for themselves. So we'll talk a bit about how to do that. Evaluating charities, how do we evaluate charities? So a lot of questions I think that we all have about how does this work? What does this mean? How does this compare to how charities are happening right now? So I'll just give you one example. GiveWell has something that's called moral weights. If you open this moral weights, you'll see that they actually quantify the number of lives saved. So they do all these amazing charts of what is the conventional one. So the value assigned to doubling consumption for 1 year for one person. So if you give people cash, this is number one. But we want to increase effectiveness. So let's say, how do I double the impact of just giving somebody cash? Can I do better than this? So they have all sorts of assigned value to the death of an individual under 5 from malaria. So I've never seen anything like this before, and I've done science for quite some time. So to me, this is revolutionary, could be very controversial, but we're going to think about these things. What does it mean putting these numbers? How do they justify these numbers? Where are these numbers coming from? So you'll deal with some of these issues, understanding their methodology, understanding how they chose. So GiveWell chooses something like 5 charities. Of all the charities in the world, they've mapped many hundreds. They chose 5. How did they choose these 5? Is this really justified? Is this really effective? Plus, and this is something amazing about the effective altruism movement that I try to do in my own research, in my own work, is they ask you to attack their methodology. So they have a contest that's running right now. This contest is GiveWell's Change Our Mind contest. So if we go over here, you can see that actually they're asking you to give them feedback on this, change our minds. And they're going to give up to $20,000 for people who convince them that there's a good alternative. And we'll aim, regardless of that money, at HKU to help them do better because they're handling billions of dollars. So if we can do something in order to help them, and then for us to understand what they're doing and then reflect on this, I think that's a very good goal for us to aim for. And then finally, some of the cognitive biases and constraints about charitable giving. So we're going to discuss a lot about outcome bias, hindsight bias, default bias, status quo bias, confirmation bias, omission bias. So each team will focus on one bias in order to understand how does this affect the way that people make decisions about giving and helping. So this is very shortly there's like grading details and all that. If you have any comments on this, stuff that you want to ask or something that is missing, something that is unclear, let me know and I'll make it even longer. No problem. Okay, good. So go home, look at this, think about this. Hope that once we get started on this, you'll see the value of how much understanding what's happening in the real world about the way that people do charity and do giving and all that. We have the course summary. Thank you for those who contributed last week. You're welcome to keep doing this. If you weren't here last week, there's some good benefits to doing that. I will go over this. I will make sure that it's accurate. Everybody helps one another, so that's good. Plus, at the end, those who contributed the most will get bonuses, which can make a difference in your tasks. So that's something for you to consider. Okay, I guess we're ready to get started. So morality part 2. Is that partly 4? Yeah, okay. So the summary of the last session is that our aim in this course is to use psychological science in order to understand better issues, core issues in our world. And I think sometimes in psychology, we feel like we're helping one individual, clinical psychology, developmental psychology, education, so maybe one school or one class, but here we're really aiming at the broadest social context possible, at the world as a whole, the universe as a whole, and all that, looking at core issues that could be a little bit philosophical, like morality, responsibility, helping, giving, risks, benefit, well-being, suffering, these kinds of things, with the aim of doing good in the world and addressing urgent issues. Now, you must be thinking, how is this practical? So we came here for advanced social psychology, and you were talking about morality and this philosopher, Peter Singer, and all this charitable giving, but what's the concrete connection to actually social psychology? Can you show us something where social psychology has something to say about these topics? So I'll give you an example of some of the stuff that we've replicated together, HKU students, in previous years. This is a replication that we just published now, which I was very curious about. So as I was trying to see how can we help charitable giving, I wanted to focus on charitable giving donations to relief camps, giving water, giving help to all sorts of camps in Africa. So we ran this study. And the study is, let's say that you have 2 refugee camps requiring, oh, maybe I should do this. Yeah, okay. So we have 2 refugee camps requiring water. You have only 1 plane with water to save the lives of 1,500 people. Thank you. And then you have 2 camps. You can send the plane to a camp with 11,000 people, and then you have a camp that's a larger, 250,000 people in that camp. And you can choose between one of these 2 camps. Which one would you send the plane to? So 2 questions. 1, what would you do? 2, what do you think most people would do? And then I really want you to reflect on this now that we're putting the scientist hat, that we're looking at this as psychological scientists, how to make sense of this. What predictions should we make? What kind of things might be going on over here? Let's think about this together. What would be the reason for people to say, I want to send the plane to the larger camp? I can only save 1,500 people, but I want to send it to the larger camp. What would be a good reason for that? There's more people that might benefit from this. Even though if the number is fixed, there's a bigger population of people that might have access to this. Why is this important? Fairness. Okay. Say a bit more about that. In what sense is this fair?
You're not doing the thinking. Like you're not selecting who you can save.
Yeah. Yeah. So why are you tying fairness to opportunity? Just make the link for me. Mm-hmm.
A decision that everyone should have equal access to.
Okay. Good. So I think there's lots of us to reflect here, right? What does it mean to have fairness? Is this really fair to them? Let's say that they have lower chances than in the smaller camp, right? And then let's say that they don't get it. Is this fair to them that we got their hopes up and then they don't get it? No, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying it's not really clear for me, which is why I wanted to hear what is fairness for you. What is fair? Because there's all ways of measuring this kind of thing. So let's say that you're the decision maker and you need to make this kind of thing. and you care about fairness. Let's say that fairness is the one thing that you really care about. How do we measure fairness? We really want to get this right. We want to do the maximum good. We don't want to have suffering. We don't want people to feel that they're not treated fairly. How to establish this? This is very, very good questions to ask. So when you use these terms, it's good to ask yourself, what do I mean when I say fairness? In what sense? But I really like your answer because it gets us to think about issues of fairness and how this might be applied in this case. Seems like there was something you wanted to say? The opposite, yeah? The small camp?
Because I think the amount of water and it says that it can save the life of also that I think with the same amount of water, I would rather to maximize the people that can be saved with the same amount of water. So rather to give it to the smaller camp.
Yeah.
So that
So you both care about proportion, but she seems to think that proportion leads to in the bigger camp to higher fairness. You're thinking about something different. How would you conceptualize this? How would you frame this? What do you care about in proportion? So you care about proportion. You want to maximize the proportion of people that might benefit from this. Because how to frame this? Effectiveness, okay.
because I think the probability of distribution, there will be a higher probability of the water is
Okay, I like this. Let's use effectiveness. So we might contrast here effectiveness versus, let's say, fairness, or the way that we define fairness in this context. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
How the water was distributed, for example.
Terrific question to ask. I also have this question. I'm sure you have many other questions about this scenario, but when we give this kind of scenarios, actually, we don't give a lot of details. So we consider this to be random noise. People imagine all sorts of things. It can go this way, it can go that way. When this becomes actually shifting from random noise to a fixed noise, is if there's a bias. So if we're not saying something, but most of the people think that there's something that's an assumption, and everybody is shifting, then we want to know about this. So it could be, and once we see the results, we can contemplate about this. What are actually the circumstances? What is the context? And could it be that this context, people are assuming something? What is your assumption in this context? What do you think is happening? No details provided. How do you think this is allocated?
For example, I think until just now we're assuming that like the water will be equally distributed to each person in the camp.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like if it can only save lives of 1,500 people, like wouldn't it just be given to like those 1,500 people from each camp?
Brilliant. Yeah. So I think we, in the proportion, assumed random assignment. Right? We pick randomly lottery and then we get lucky you. Could be that the circumstances are we dump the water in the middle of the camp, fight for it, right? Go for it. And then you can imagine the chaos, 250,000. So circumstances are super important. It's great that you raised this. Great. Anything else you want to say? Yes? You okay? Yeah. So who's feeling? The decision maker's feeling. Okay, very good. Yeah. So now we take into consideration not the effectiveness of how this is going to distribute or fairness, but how the person making the decisions is going to feel about themselves. Great. Yeah.
Like more people will be feeling that the unfair.
Yeah. These are terrific insights. And I'm going to use these insights because we have to do some follow-up studies to this. First, I'm going to show you what we did, and then I'm going to show you something very frustrating. So we only have 4 answers over here, so we can't make too much of it. But I think that the general inclination is the smaller camp, right? Nobody chose the larger camp, which is really interesting. So if we think of ourselves as kind of representative of other people who have all kinds of emotions about this. We might get to. So we did a replication. You can see all the Hong Kong University students here, plus Chinyu and Kit, who were students and then became MPhil students. And then Ignazio, he just received associate professor, so he was promoted last week. He's in France, moving to Switzerland. And he worked with our team. He came in, gave answers, and then he integrated the two very large replications that we did into one submission. And then the reviewers were very unsatisfied in the way that I am unsatisfied, and I'm going to share this with you. And then they asked for an additional data collection just to verify that this makes sense. And then we did an additional data collection, exactly the same kind of results. So the very frustrating thing about this is that the original study in 1997 showed that, so 4,500 lives, either 11,000 or 250. So in 1997, they showed that people prefer the former. They prefer to save lives if they had a higher proportion. So a little bit like you were talking about proportion as being something that's critical here, saying that they would prefer to have a higher proportion, thereby contributing to the small camp. And I thought this is brilliant. I just want to verify this by running a replication. So we had two teams working on this, HKU students, 4 students in each team, or 2 students in each, can't remember how many, 2 or 3 or 4, something like that. And we ran one in an American sample, and we ran one in a British sample, prolific and Amazon Mechanical Turk. And then we did this for 2 studies. Actually, we had study 1 and study 2. And then what happened is that we found mixed support, 2 successful applications of study 2 that really showed this kind of effect. The thing is that when we ran study 1, we found exactly the opposite. So in study 1, they went for the larger camp. In study 2, they went for the smaller camp. And then the reviewers were baffled by this. So they said, please run the failed replication again. So when you found the opposite findings, please go back and revisit this. So we ran a 3rd study. So we had actually, what was it? Study 1A, study 1B, study 1-3. So we did like 3 replications of this. And once again, we found that in study 1, they went for the larger camp. And now we're trying to wreck our brains. It's like, first of all, this is a failed replication. So why can't we find what they found in 1997? So it goes to show we need to revisit things. It could be that something changed from 1997 to now. It could be that something just was like a fluke. So we published something that we need to update. So first of all, it shows you the value of replications. And not just replicating one study in an article, but replicating 2 studies that have different methods, different designs. But then what happens when you get opposite findings with 2 different studies? It could be that there's something about the methodology in study 1 versus the methodology in study 2 that is important. And we think so. So the differences between those 2 is that in one of them, the comparisons were direct. People said, you have the large camp, you have the small camp, make a choice between these 2. In the second study, we actually, so the one that worked was in this kind of comparison. The one that didn't work is one where they had to do indirect comparisons. So they weren't comparing one to the other. They were comparing this to other programs. And then from that, we indirectly were able to make the assessment. So indirectly, they seem to be going for the larger camp. Still, this is a puzzle to me. And I think we should know before we make these kinds of decisions, what would people do? How would people allocate this? If I'm donating to a charity, if there is a decision maker, if I'm willing to purchase, an airplane with water to give this to the decision maker, and they can make a decision between this and that, I want to know how they will make the decision where this is going to go. To what extent is this going to be effective? So we can ask a lot of questions about this. So this is just like one example of how we apply social psychological science to look at a decision that has an impact on lives saved. Yeah, so think about this. If you want, you can go and have a look at the paper, but we definitely need to follow up on this and see some some follow-up studies. So for example, over here, you can see that in some it was completely consistent, full replication. In the other one, it was exactly the opposite, going in the other direction. So I can skip this. So in sum, I think whenever we talk about morality, there are some issues that we need to consider about different people seeing things in a different way, but also that the same kind of people might see the same situation in a different way if presented with different kind of information. We'll come back to this slide, but some people have a question of asking me, what is the difference between morality and ethicality? How do we differentiate between these two? So whenever we talk about morality, you will ask that you will see that I will ask for your opinion. So what do you think is the right thing to do here? And in these kinds of questions, there is no real right or wrong, which is why what GiveWell is trying to do with moral weights is very, very complicated. Because if you look at this one, for example, you know, the two women looking at each other and judging one another for how they're dressed, applying their social codes, their moral codes, the things that they grew up with, by judging the other person. So if you're trying to do something that's moral for an entire world, like GiveWell is trying to do, how you want to maximize morality, want to maximize good, utilitarian, how do I know that I'm maximizing good? So think about this, this paradigm of morality. With unethical behavior, it's a little bit clearer, because at least with unethical behavior, we have a strict law, have a strict code, have a strict policy, and then it should be defined well enough for you to know whether you're acting unethically or not. So unethicality is more about strict laws, regulations, and policies, whereas morality seems to be something that's a bit more controversial, something that we can debate, something that we should come to an agreement about. And there's a big debate whether there's one moral code that should be applied to everything, or whether there's something that's relative and should be applied differently. And this is what we're going to do in the second half of our discussion. So I'll give you like a 5-minute break, go refresh yourself. We'll come back and then we'll try and think together how to conceptualize moral decisions. How many of you have heard of trolley dilemmas, right? Some of you have. In what context? Where did you hear about this? Sorry? In English class. Terrific. So you know what this is about. See, anybody want to share what this is about? Who hasn't seen this before? I think it's easier. Who hasn't seen this? Wanting? Since you've seen this before, what is the point? You saw in English class, what was the point of doing this? Let's recap just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So what we have here is we have a running trolley, running on the track and cannot be stopped. If allowed to keep on running, it will hit 5 people, kill them, 5 people. But then you have the ability, you're standing on the side and there's a lever that you can pull in order to divert the trolley. So you take action. By taking action, something happens to the trolley, and then it goes to a side track where you have 1 person, right? So you can choose not to do anything and then 5 people die, or you can choose to do something, pull a lever, and then the trolley diverts and kills one person. What do most people answer in these kinds of situations? People will pull the lever, thereby diverting the trolley. Is this the case for most of you? Yeah, do you agree with this? Why do people answer this way? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Like my family will be sad.
Yeah.
But for this,
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, utilitarian. So maximizing value or minimizing harm. So instead of 5, just the 1. If you remember last week, we had the drowning child where we saw one paradigm. We thought that we were answering one way. And then immediately following this was a different question, also a drowning girl or a girl's death. but then we saw some fallacy. We saw some problem with the assumption that we always aim to minimize harm or maximize value of lives. So how can we shift this in order to show some fallacy? What is another version of this that will show us that this is a lot more complicated than we thought? Yes, please. Sorry, so one person is who? Innocent. Okay, so an innocent person, a really, really good person versus 5 criminals, convicted criminals that we know are bad people. Would you still do the same thing? Your answer, you think, in this kind of case? Does it change? Do you think it's still utility of 5 versus 1, or something changed about the utility? Yeah, very, very good, very good. You're challenging the paradigm.
Insane.
Yeah.
And we cannot discriminate because they are the criminals.
Yeah.
I think it is the so-called law, but for my opinion, I was
Still turn.
I would say that
You'll say the innocent. Okay, so this manipulation change in the scenario causes you to shift from being utilitarian to being something different. How would you call this something different? What is causing this difference? Try to frame this, call this by a name. Sorry? Vigilante. Taking law into your own hands, something like that. So he calls this vigilante. Do you have a better name for this? No? Okay. So this is interesting, shifting to 1 innocent versus 5 criminals. Anything else that might shift these preferences? Okay. Yeah, now we need to assess whether so we're standing next to the liver, the train is running, and you're like, what crimes have you done? Difficult to assess this because we're in the moment, we need to make a decision. So now we're starting to maybe if this is this crime, and then how do I average this? On average is this and the innocent. Difficult stuff, but I appreciate the comment about there is the severity of criminals. Criminals for what? Did he take a bubble gum from a convenience store, or did he do something a bit more meaningful? And what really, between us, what does it mean to be innocent? What is innocence, right?
Right to judge the other person.
Oh, do we have the right to judge them? So that's what you're saying about vigilante, right? Can we take the law into, can we make this kind of decision? Who are we? We're not innocent. We did all sorts of things in our lives, right? Maybe not great crimes, but none of us is perfect. Who are we to make this kind of decision? And there are structures in the world, so we need to, pause the trolley, go to the Supreme Court, have a discussion, and then make a decision. But we don't have time for that. Great, criminals is a great point. Anything else that might change? Age? Yeah, pregnant woman is valued, for example, more than contrast pregnant woman against old man. Okay, so first let's say pregnant woman versus not pregnant, and then pregnant woman versus pregnant man. So we can think about all kinds of gender, whether there's another person, a future person inside, that kind of thing. Contrasting this with age. So now you're raising age. Very good points. What else?
Like how the original problem is set up.
Okay.
It's like you're actively killing a person by pulling them first. I don't think it's such a fair comparison because, like, I think it would be better if you pull a lever, you press a button to actually just like direct the train to kill, whoever, like one car.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying there's something about the action versus inaction that is biasing these. Let's say that somebody must die, but in order for somebody to die, you need to press either this or that. So both of them are action. Action versus action, inaction. Very good point. There's something about action in action here that is shifting the way that people perceive this kind of situation. Very good. We need to take this into account. I do a lot of research about action versus inaction and the implications for morality. We've done a lot of replications about omission bias, action effect, these kinds of things, and you will be applying these effects in your tasks. So very good point about action in action. So this is the typical scenario. What will you do? So I don't think any of you actually answer this, but the following one is, so the classic one in the I can't remember, 70s, when trolley problems started to go. So this also has something to do with action and inaction, but this is a different aspect of action and inaction. Most people say, yes, I will divert, no problem. But let's say there's a runaway trolley and there's only one track, but you're standing on top of a bridge and there's a man next to you. In the scenario, it's described as a large man. And then what it is that you need to do in order to stop the trolley is push the man in order to fall down on the tracks and stop the trolley. Will you do that? So utilitarian value of lives, 5 versus 1. Not even criminals, not even like everybody is innocent. We just want to maximize good. Will you push the person in order to save the 5? What would most people say? No. Why? What is the difference? Yeah, it's not a liver and then something happens and then the trolley diverts. But is there really a difference between the two? No, but the way that we think about this psychologically is very, very different, right? So we need to understand how people think about these kinds of situations. What is one step further than this? So now we understand action in action, physical touch, us actually doing something. But I was always curious why people don't take this to one further step, and it's this step. So this is you and a stranger standing on a bridge. Will you push the person? And the other version, which is very similar to this, you and another person are standing on the bridge, but you have 2 options. One is to push the stranger. The other is to jump yourself, hit the track, die, being run over a trolley and save the others. Will you sacrifice yourself in order to save the other 5? That's altruism, right? So if you're Wesley and you have your 2 kids next to you, maybe you would do that. So I don't know exactly how to think about this kind of situation, but that is really altruism. So you put yourself at risk, or in this case, definite death, in order to save others. What is the proportion of the population that would say yes to this? Very close to 0, right? Yeah. So this is an interesting scenario for us to reflect on. I see some of you have answered. Pull the lever, causing, okay, 3 to 1. Do nothing, that makes sense. Interesting. This one kind of asks you to rank all of these. So I try to put all of these together in one ranking and asking you, like, rank the options. Do nothing and allow the trolley to kill the 5 people. Push a stranger. Push your friend. Is this a friend, somebody that you know? And then jump off, or perhaps you don't want to decide this kind of thing, so you just go to the stranger or your friend and say, I'll let you decide who is going to die, me or you. So I think there's lots of very interesting philosophical directions that we can take with these sort of scenarios. You can design your own. There's millions of these things going around online. Think about this, rate this as you'd like. The first scenario actually happened with Philip Foot in the 1970s about the surgeon. And this is really a little bit closer to the would you push the other person down from the bridge? And the scenario was 5 patients at a hospital are expected to die soon. A 6th man is undergoing routine checkup at the same hospital. The transplant surgeon needs to decide, the only way to save the 5 patients is to slay the 6th person, take the organs, and transplant this into the other 5. Should you do this? if you would be able to do this kind of thing, our society would be in chaos. This will have extreme implications. But she was trying to debate this philosophically. What is the right thing for us to do here? Now, this seems like a hypothetical scenario, but is there something in our lives that brings this closer to reality? What's the closest to this that we experience in our lives? Can you see anything that resembles this in our lives? Sorry? Just transplanting organs. So for example, give your kidney. There's somebody here with a healthy kidney. Let's just take that kidney and transplant this to somebody else. Okay, so that's a different version of this. It's not total death. Is that easier to think of as being right? Do you think most people would say, yeah, take the kidney? Yeah. Kidney is not as life, well, it depends what happened to the kidney, but yeah, so interesting thinking about what kind of, is it complete death or is it injury? I like that suggestion. So we can think or contemplate the morality of this. Is there anything even closer to where we are right now in the world? Think about this, we'll come back to this. I'm not going to run the summary because we all know what trolley dilemma is and you've listened to many of these summaries before. But I think we can use the trolley dilemma as a paradigm to model. It's a good model. It simplifies a lot of things. Some of the scenarios that we saw in previous weeks, the previous week. So for example, Wesley over here, how would you turn this into a trolley dilemma? What are the two paths? What is the action and the inaction? So there is actually a runaway trolley. There is a train coming. And then what is the... Yeah. Yeah. So I think one path is perhaps certainty. The person is going to die. The other path is take a chance and see what happens. Either nobody dies or both of you die. So we can model this more simply, something that looks very complex. We can try and use this a little bit. Then we need to think, how do we, is there other people around? Is there what's happening with the kids? We can try and build on this, but the most simple dilemma can be modeled as a trolley dilemma, right? We can also do a similar thing with Wang Yue. How to model this, you can think as a trolley dilemma, but I think we can translate almost every complicated story into something that looks a little bit like a trolley dilemma, right? So try and model this one as well. And this is the connection between last week, where it seemed like perhaps a little bit overwhelming with all these questions about our morality and all this, but I think it helps to try and simplify this. And then if we run an experiment, rather than giving all this contextual information and there's so many things going on, we can try and really simplify this to what is the core question that we want to do here. So when we run experiments in experimental philosophy or social psychology, we really try to reduce the noise, make it as clean as possible so that we can get to the heart of the point. Is it action or inaction? Is it criminals innocent? Is it the number of lives? Is it certainty versus probability? And there's actually a lot of jokes and games about the trolley dilemma. So a lot of memes going around here. So for example, this is how you imagine the trolley problem, you making the decision, but usually it's like the rich people who are making these decisions, whether to save themselves or save us. And then somebody saying it's like, we're all going to die at the end. It's just a matter of who dies first, right? It's just first the one person or the other five. Then there's this probability of certainty versus probability. Do we want to take the chance? So people model this. There's like a million versions of this. Try and show you some of these. I found all kinds of different websites that kind of try and model this, but it just like goes on forever, and people just use all sorts of things about this. The trolley dilemma even modeled the So what is this about? What kind of recent political issue was this referring to? In the last debate, there's lots of student loans in the US. And then Biden, the president of the United States, decided not all of the loans, but he's going to give between 10,000 and 20,000 US dollars to people who have loans. And then a common argument, mostly by the opposition, was, but it's not fair towards the other people who have already paid back their loans. So people were kind of like, yeah, let's just model this as a trolley dilemma. Does this mean if other people were hurt by this, does this mean that we don't need to save the other people who are affected by this? So you can really play with this with all sorts of different things. And I think this is a very extreme version of the politics in the US. I think it also kind of doesn't take into account usually that there are some people who would always want to do things even worse. Is there an option to kill the 5 and then come back and kill the 6? So lots of different things about this. But most recently, have you seen this? There's actually a technical solution to the trolley dilemma. Somebody was able to solve the trolley dilemma. What kind of solution is there to the trolley dilemma? It's unbelievable. When I saw this, I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So this is how it works. So if you pull the lever just at the right moment, it splits between the tracks and then like brilliant, like with the kind of things that people go into, unbelievable. So that's kind of interesting. And there's a website, somebody that I follow on Twitter does these absurd trolley problems. So for example, this one is whether save the Mona Lisa or save 5 people, which one are you gonna do? So you can go on the website and participate in all kinds of these really ridiculous notions of that. Yeah, there's also, I won't go into this right now, but some of the people that I know in social psychology are asking slightly different questions. Instead of asking, what would you do in this situation? They're asking, let's say that we have people who said in the classic trolley dilemma that they said that they're going to divert, but some people said that they're not going to divert. Which one would you prefer to date? Which one would you rather marry? So let me ask you, what do you think? Which one would you prefer, the utilitarian or the deontologist? Do you prefer the one that will divert into the 1 or the one that will let the 5 die? What do you think most people would want to date or marry? It seems like utilitarians are not very popular for some reason. So most people go for the deontologist. And the nice thing that I wanted to tell you about this one, I don't know if you noticed, but both of them are published. So they're the same experiment, basically. They're both published in a very good journal, the Journal of Experimental Psychology General. And the thing is that both of them were working on this at the same time. So they were working on this, and then it seems like a very prominent, so Molly Crockett, we'll talk about Molly, and Dave, he does the Very Bad Wizards podcast. So they were working on this as well, and they submitted to the journal, not knowing about each other. They submitted at the same time, and turns out that this group over here got there first, and then the journal said, actually, we can keep your paper if you call this a replication, even though they didn't do this as a replication. But overall, both of them have exactly the same findings. And the findings says the present study clearly confirmed the main finding of Jim. Deontologists are more trusted than utilitarians in this kind of scenario. So one of the questions is, would you judge other people who are not, acting up? There's Donald Trump over here that says all sorts of things that I think are a bit ridiculous.
I got to watch some deputy sheriffs performing this weekend. They weren't exactly Medal of Honor winners, all right? The way they performed was, frankly, disgusting. They were listening to what was going on. The one in particular, he was early. Then you had 3 others that probably a similar deal a little bit later, but a similar kind of a thing. I really believe, you don't know until you test it, but I think I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon And I think most of the people in this room would have done that too, because
So the situation here is where you have a shooter that's just shooting down students in a school, and he was unhappy with some of the security guards that went outside to call the police rather than sacrificing themselves. And the president of the United States is saying, if I was there, even if I didn't have a weapon, I would storm in and save those kids because I know myself and I know you, and you're all very, very good people. And to me, this seems a little bit far-fetched and ridiculous. But my question to you as psychological scientists is, how can we test this? How can we get Donald Trump to really confront the situation to make sure that we know that this is how he's going to act? How to do this? Is there a way? Replicate why the shooting, yeah? And put Donald Trump in there as a security guard? Very good. Why are you laughing? Is there a problem? What's the problem with this? What's unethical about this? Emotional distress, yes. So the possibility of people dying and emotional distress, and we care about this. When we do ethics review, if you're doing a thesis, you need to submit. However, we need to make sure that nobody is harmed. So even though I want to ask Donald Trump and see whether he's really going to do this kind of thing, but I do need to, explain to the ethics committee whether he's going to get some emotional distress. And the distress is first in being in this very stressful situation. He's used to it. He was a president. He makes this kind of decision. But it could be that he might be confronted with realizing that he's not the person that he thought he might be, or something else that might go on in there. And for a very long time, we were trying to figure out how can we test this as social psychologists, and how can we make sure that we can do this ethically. So we know that there's emotional distress, but Dries actually did an experiment with trolley, real life trolley dilemma. How did he do this? Yes? He's a tag paintball. Yeah, but that's not realistic enough, is it? Yes? VR, yeah, I think it's about the same kind of direction. Very good. We do trolley dilemmas in VR. This is what he did. So Dries over here, together with with Arne, of mice, men, and trolleys. He wanted to know if people say that they're going to act a certain way, are they actually going to act that way? So first he brought people to the lab and gave them a trolley dilemma and see how they responded. And then the following week, instead of doing this with humans, he did this with mice. So people walked into a lab and immediately it said to them, these mice, 5 mice, are going to be zapped unless you push that button. 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. And this is a scenario he was able to get ethical approval for this, because this is not human lives and we do sacrifice mice in lab experiments. I still think there's something very stressful about this, because even if it's mice, you see the mice, they're in front of you. I should say no mice were killed in this experiment. It's just putting people in the situation that looks very, very realistic, as if mice are going to be into this. And to make this convincing, this is not an easy experiment to run. So we do stuff in social psychology, mostly with the surveys and experiments. He brought people to the lab. He had this very elaborate setup. He was able to do this. So I really thought, this is 2018, I really thought this is the most extreme version of this, but to my great surprise, actually somebody did far more than this with real people. And this didn't come from a researcher. Actually, I just want to say, this was very controversial. So this was the original study, and this is all the people, and I know some of these people very, very well. I know these folks. People had a lot of things to say about this. This is not reflective, and especially they didn't like the conclusion that people deviated. So they said they're going to do one thing, but actually in reality, the correlation was quite low. But then he gave, I think, a very reasonable long reply to each one of these concerns. But it's an ongoing debate. If people say that they're going to do something, are they actually going to do something about this? But I think it was a really revolutionary study about this. Opened a few things. I'm going to show you in the remaining time a real life trolley dilemma. that was done by a TV show. So they decided that they're going to run this. And I want you to really think about this. I want you to think about the ethicality of this. I want you to think about what we do in social psychology and how we test morality. And I especially want you to consider what it means to be a participant and think about these things. So first, the setup. What was the setup? And then I'll show you one of the participants.
This is where we're going to physically create the trolley problem in real life. Not with a trolley, but with a train. Our subjects will sign in at this booth for our phony focus test, which will never actually take place. It's gonna be a hot day for them. So we'll offer them, while they wait for the actual test to begin, the chance to sit inside this nice air-conditioned remote switching station. Inside, they'll meet a kindly train switch operator, supposedly an employee of the California Railroad Authority. The California Railroad Authority is real. Real fake. We invented this non-existent government organization to convince our subjects that everything here is real, including these monitors showing supposedly live shots of actual trains from different tracks all around the California area. While the participant is waiting inside this room, they'll learn how the operator switches the tracks using a lever to remotely switch a train from one track to another. They'll see it happen. We're actually controlling the video on these screens from a different hidden control room. At a given time, the switch operator will leave the subject alone in the switching station. And at that point, a crisis will occur. A train will be barreling down the tracks, and workers will have made their way out to both tracks, 5 on one worker on his phone on the other. No one is around for them to alert who has any kind of control or authority. Switching the train is up to the subject alone. They'll feel like what they do has real-world consequences. Will 5 people die, or will 1?
This is insane. This is really gets you to think about this. What do you think in this kind of real life situation? What do you think would happen with most people? Choose the one? Yeah. All right, let me show you one of the participants. They had a very small sample. They only did this with about 10 participants. So we don't have a large enough sample to make anything meaningful. The meaningful thing to take away from this is to see a person experience moral decisions. So we're sitting here in the aircon, very comfortable in our chairs, thinking about, oh, drowning girl, oh, people in Africa. Life is great. We just need to, oh, maybe I'll give money here, maybe I'll give money there. Think of yourselves as really being the decision maker. Where are you going to send the plane? Who are you going to save?
I'll say. It is quite the test. At this point, one subject had switched the tracks and 5 others had not. But we weren't done yet.
5 had
Meet
not.
Corey.
1 did.
Here, have a seat.
Much obliged, thank you. This is cool.
This whole module will interconnect with the entire nation if we wanted it to.
Right.
But right now we're looking at just track 1 on the left, track 2 through there. These are many, many miles away.
Yeah.
But they're all live feeds.
Surveying the scene, Eagle's point of view.
Yeah. Let me see what this is. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, got it.
He's remaining engaged.
Here come the workers.
Oh, no.
Attention, object on track.
Yeah.
So he realizes there's a potential problem.
I think he's gonna go out.
Attention, train approaching.
There's a train coming.
Okay.
Attention, object on track.
Yeah.
Attention, train approaching.
Okay, he realizes there's no one there. It's urgent.
Okay, so it needs to go to...
Object on track.
Okay, he's rehearsing what to do.
The track, attention.
Oh,
Approach
track
attention.
2. Do they not know?
Attention, approaching.
I know. They should see this.
Object on track. Attention. Train approaching. Attention. Object on track. Attention.
Oh,
Object on track.
get out.
End of test.
Okay, good.
Everyone is safe.
Hello.
Hi, Corey.
Hey.
The guy is in shock. Even though it said everybody is safe, the guy is in shock. He doesn't understand what happened. What he went through is very, very real. Who gave them ethical permission to do this? So the professor is telling the TV host, he's the one who approved this from, he's part of a university and he approved the ethicality of this. This is devastating. And now we're going to see the emotional reaction from this person. I've watched this many times, and it's still difficult for me to see this happening to him.
My name's Michael.
There was just almost an accident, seemingly.
Corey, everything that just happened was an experiment.
Okay.
No one was in danger.
For sure.
These were just loops of video taken before. This is a psychology experiment looking at how people behave in various circumstances.
Okay. Yeah.
So tell me how you were feeling.
Mainly a bunch of terror and responsibility because I was at the helm, and just horrified about making a decision between like 5 people compared to 1. It was very scary to say the least.
It was scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
What was going through your mind as the train's coming down the track?
It was mainly to warn them.
They're just to
What's coming up?
reiterate-
What's coming up right now?
You don't want to have to choose between people.
Right.
And that was really tough. Either like 6 families or 1 family. It was like, up to me, it felt like, yeah.
It was interesting to me that you had such presence of mind.
Yeah, look for help and make a decision. The one that everyone, if you ask them in a survey, says that they would like to be brave enough to make.
Yes. So that was impressive, Corey. It really was.
Thank you.
You know, I think it would be good to have you meet some of the people who participate.
So then he gets to meet the actors, and then he looks okay. But I can assure you, I don't know the person. He's going to live with this for the rest of his life. This is not something that you forget. So they said, yeah, we're going to debrief him. We're going to tell him what happened. We're going to give him a call center if he has any emotional problems. He is going to have I have emotional problems watching this. So it's devastating. And sometimes we need to take into consideration that when we're dealing with moral situations, moral decisions, we need to consider the feelings of the people who are making decisions. And I just want to say before we go away, I worry about your feelings taking this course and doing these moral decisions and effective charities together with me. I want to make sure that you're okay. I want to make sure that you don't feel like I'm forcing you into these kinds of situations. I want to know that you can go through this journey with me, but I can say it's not always comfortable. We're asking some difficult decisions, but we are doing this for the greater good. We are trying to understand how we can help each other. In order for us to be able to help, especially as psychologists, sometimes we need to put ourselves in these kinds of situations. I don't know if you're aware of this, but many psychologists, especially clinical psychologists, have to have their own psychologist in order to go through this. In order for you to be able to offer support to other people, you need to have support. You need to have guidance. You need to be able to deal with this complex situation. So if you do feel at any point in time during this course that you want to talk about things, if this feels too much, too overwhelming, let me know. At the very least, we need to understand that we're dealing with people. And when we try to alleviate suffering, poverty, do the most good, we also need to consider the psychology of the people making these decisions and also of us, the scientists. Next week, we're going to continue with this, and we're going to realize that actually trolley dilemmas have a very real impact on our world right now. because we have self-driving autonomous vehicles that are making these decisions about how to deal with these kinds of situations. Do we want the Google Tesla developer to make this kind of decisions, or do we need to make this kind of decisions together as a society? So we have a bunch of very impressive findings from social psychology to help guide us, or at least show us how complicated this is and the issues that we need to address. So to me, fascinating stuff. Hope that it gets you thinking about this, and then we'll talk a bit more next week. See you then.